Welcome to another episode of TinkChat. I'm one of your hosts, Eugene.
I'm Andy.
So we're going to jump into a topic that is kind of interesting today. It's museums and artifacts. How 3D printing is changing the museum landscape and, well, I guess cataloging artifacts. So you did a lot of the research on this one, Andy.
Yes,
so
I did.
I'll let you take over and I'll see if I can plug in my own opinions on some of these.
So I've been doing a lot of digging on this, and actually a lot of museums are utilizing 3D printing more than we thought. The first place that I looked into was Victoria and Albert Museum, and that's located in London. They are using 3D printing in a very unique way. Instead of using 3D printing to replicate like the original structures, sculptures, or stuff like that, they actually use a 3D scanner or someone models it, so they have a digital sculpture of the, I guess, the artifact. And afterwards, they bring it into a children's hospital, and then they let them interact with this digital file of the artifact. And then the children then can use that and add it into their own designs.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. So something actually that's really cool. One of the school districts that we work with really closely, I believe it was Surrey. They actually did something similar to us, with us as well. They brought a Aboriginal kind of artifact that they were working with First Nations individuals, and they wanted us to 3D scan that so that the students can interact with the replicated articles. And so it kind of feels like that, right? Where, museums are changing. Do you remember going to a museum when you were younger? Or, where you want to touch and it's bright, big red sign that says, please do not touch.
There's a huge gap in between, especially for the one that I went to. When I was younger, I lived in Calgary, so I went to Drumheller. That's the place that's famous for dinosaur fossils. And dinosaur fossils fascinating for kids. But then it was just so far away that you can't really interact with it. You don't actually get to touch it or anything. You don't it's just a different experience.
It's more of a viewing experience, and I think it's transforming into a hands-on experience. Right? It's really playing on that fascination for whoever's visiting. It could be kids, it could be adults, it could be whoever's there. And actually touching it. And I think what's really cool is they're bringing it outside of the museum. So children's hospitals, typically, there are certain scenarios where children are actually in those facilities for an extended period of time. And so education still needs to occur. So why not replicate something that is very close and bring it there? I think I would have wanted that. I think a lot of kids would have wanted that. And if that's the direction that the museums are going with any of these artifacts or relics, I'm going to call it relics, really cool. We need more of this.
Well, that's for this museum in London. They're taking what I think was a very unique approach. If we dial back to this Museum of History, I think it was called Manacor Museum of History, and that's actually located in Spain. They have their collection of artifacts are actually, some of them are actually 3D printed objects. So that will allow the guests to be more interactive with them. So instead of taking the real artifact out, and people can't touch it in case anything breaks or anything, they 3D print a fake one. That's very close to the original one, using, I'm guessing they use more exotic materials for it as well, just to make the touch, color, everything more similar to the original thing. And then they allow their guests to interact with them.
You know what's actually fascinating? A lot of the times people think about 3D printing as what we know 3D printing as, which is filament-centric printing. So you're typically left with a single color, and then somebody has to do post-processing, paint it, sand it, whatever. But there is, in fact, technologies that allow you to print in full color. You literally get a part that has all the color data of the original.
It's not the one where it's like a FDM printer, but then it injects like 6 different colors in?
No, it's powder-centric.
Okay.
And they use a binder that has color, and then they mix it like inkjet. They literally mix it like inkjet. And so it's not the most durable material, but it will give you very high quality prints, and it will give you the color data. So, if an artifact is kind of brown in color because it has oxidated and rusted over time, it's going to capture all that. It's going to capture the divots. It's going to capture the different colors. And if you were to hold them up side by side, you can obviously tell which one is the original.
Yeah.
But the replica will be so close that
partly from if you put it afar, no one actually
you would probably not be able to tell.
Yeah.
And so that's probably the right technology. The original technology for that was called 3DP. So 3D printing technology, but it's powder. A lot of people have played with Gibson and other materials, but the binder is color. It's you can imagine what you can do with paper.
Yeah.
You can do with this.
Well, I'm thinking with this whole binder with different colors, if it does fail, it'll probably get very messy, wouldn't it?
I don't think I've ever seen a failed print from binder jet.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, when it does fail, you would probably still get the same failure you would get with FDM. Everything is kind of offset, and it's gonna go on a slant that the original model wasn't intended to do.
But then I'm just guessing with all the color stuff, it might.
You know what's fascinating?
What?
So when you print in powder, everything is, once it's done, you have to kind of excavate it out like an artifact, right? So there's something weird going on with relics, artifacts. You dig it out, you process it, and then all of a sudden you're doing 3D printing with it, and now you got to repeat the whole entire process again.
Yeah.
Not that it was intentional that it was to be done that way, but the technology affords. So it's actually built. When it's built, it's actually not free floating like filament-centric machines. It's encased in the powder that it's printed in, and so. Again, I've never seen a failed print from a 3D machine or a powder bed, but...
Well, I'm sure there's... Nothing's perfect.
No, I don't think it's going to be that dramatic of a failure, short of machine actually failing in itself, right? Yeah. So, that's an art piece in its own.
Yeah.
Derailing, kind of getting back on topic a little bit, so go ahead.
Well, so with the museum in Spain allows guests to interact with them. And what we always say at Tinkerine is, like, even if we let our customers, our guests, teachers play with all the prints that we printed out, and we're like, don't worry, if it breaks, we'll just print it again. Yeah. And I'm guessing in a museum's point of view, that's actually really reassuring. Instead of losing a $1 million piece of artifact, they probably lose a couple cents. You would never, in a million years, touch the original thing in a museum. But then I'm sure it'll be replicated to very similar to the real thing. Yeah. So this is one of those scenarios where you can actually have the actual thing, behind a glass cage right in front of you, and you can lay out 10 different pieces to hand out to whoever is doing the tour or there to see the exhibit, and for them to actually look at what it is that they see and feel what it is that is going to be not 100%, but very close, right? So it's like a 4D experience to a museum, right? Like a museum has typically been visual, very visual. And maybe some of it is audio. And I've been to a couple of museums where they add scent to it, where like you're walking through like a rainforest. And I don't know how they put that in, but I'm like, the scent is there. But this just adds another element of interactivity. And in the world of changing landscapes and businesses, museums are looking to evolve as well. Give a better experience, give better experiences. This is a really great way of doing it. I was just wondering, I don't know, maybe just trying to play the devil's advocate. Yeah. But would people actually be like, oh, I feel cheated because I'm not seeing the real thing? I'm going to a museum to see like 1 million years of history, but then now it's actually just a replica on the shelf. Yeah, maybe. But I don't know. And that's where I think a lot of the trial and error for, I'm going to call it the business model, needs to happen, right? So let's just say you have like a 1 million year arrowhead, or whatever, stone carved arrowhead. Yeah. You probably wouldn't want to make that disappear into the back room and only show the replica. True.
I mean, if it's up for restoration, then sure, right? But it's one of those scenarios where you should probably be able to see the real thing,
but get to touch the replica kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And so in that way, like, are you cheated? No.
Yeah, but
without the interactive part already there, anyways, that would have been what you would have experienced.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah.
Right. So I don't know.
Well, just wondering. I'm not that person, but like
I think some people may.
Yeah.
But if done right, you could probably get a better experience than a worse one, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on from museums, a lot of other museums are actually doing a lot of things with 3D printing as well. But moving on, more on site with like artifacts, history, and stuff. There's been using 3D printing to be part of landmark restoration.
Oh, fascinating.
So essentially, in the article I was reading, it was the 72 dragon sculptures at the Great Pagoda, I think that's how you pronounce it. And the wood was rotting away. So actually at the site, there was a lot of those dragon sculpture which had either missing a head, missing detail, because it's just from wear and tear from nature, right? So a bunch of restoration people actually took upon 3D printing, the SLS technology, to create these new dragon heads to be replaced there.
Yeah. For those that do not know what SLS technology is, it's the resin-based technology that gives probably the highest fidelity end result you can get out of a 3D print right now in kind of all the landscapes of technologies for additive manufacturing. You know what's kind of really cool? We talked about this a little bit in the previous episode of preservation.
Yeah.
And preserving something digitally allows you to continue to replicate it and replace it and fix it to this kind of the state of what it was when you took that image. A classic thing within the automotive industry is taking the designs of things that used to be made in mass volume, you know, like 1940s cars or whatever, and producing 10 offs or 100 offs. This is, in a way, kind of similar. If you imagine, you can kind of see it, right? So if they can preserve the data, the 3D data, at a point in which they can restore to that point, they can keep making very limited runs of these parts, which means if something breaks, you just replace it. Something breaks, you just replace it. At a certain point, if you replace too much of it, is it still the same part? Now that's a different question altogether, but preservation is one of those things that is pretty important.
Yeah.
Even if you just leave something sitting there, it's going to have wear and tear. It's going to break down. Yeah. I think that's smart. I think that's absolutely smart to do. And so, I mean, there's certain elements of this. The artifact printing, the guest handling of components, those are all in the hopes to preserve.
Yes.
For longer, for you know, the actual physical item to live past its potential breakdown date. Yeah. And so I think that's a similar, like, I think we're seeing a similar kind of concept approach.
Well, it's all aimed to save the previous history, culture, so that doesn't die off this earth and we still know it existed.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting use of it.
Yeah.
Whereas like what we do when we design something, we already have the digital blueprint.
Yes.
Whereas all these old artifacts, they don't exist.
Yes.
And so one of the only ways to do it is to, well, 3D scan it.
Yeah.
If it's simple enough architectural or structural piece, like a square thing, I guess you could CAD that up. But a lot of these, I'm assuming...
These are probably hand-carved, handmade and everything, so it's a bit hard.
There is no blueprint.
Yeah, there is no blueprint. Well, the blueprint was in someone's head.
Yeah.
But...
And I think one of the things is a lot of these preservation and capturing things, they show the strength of another synergistic technology, 3D scanning.
Yeah.
3D scanning, well, it's useful for us, what we do. Structural stuff can always be, or mechanical stuff can always be redesigned in the digital CAD side of things.
Yeah.
when you have organic shapes, it is so difficult to do.
Yes.
And 3D scanning is great, and we've seen some kind of consumer-grade 3D scanning technologies around.
Yeah.
But those don't have the accuracy that we're talking about that these museums and places are actually using. So they're using super high-end stuff to capture as much data about the curve as possible.
Everything,
So
well, they want to make it as close to the original as possible.
Yeah. So they're either bringing somebody in or they're bringing it to somebody. One of probably bringing somebody, given the actual articles and artifacts that they're actually doing. So I can't imagine them transporting this, halfway around the globe.
I think it's usually bring someone in. Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Risking it. Why put it in more risk by shipping it out?
Right. True.
Which Eugene already touched upon, which is great because our next was actually damage reconstruction. So in that one, it's literally sculptures. I believe the site that I'm about to show you, like right now, there's a sculpture of a head with one half of their face like missing because it's broken.
Right.
And then afterwards, so they digitally scan the whole sculpture, and afterwards they put it in a CAD, and then they digitally CAD the other side of the
missing part.
The missing part out, and then they just printed the missing part out, and then they put it on.
Did they mirror the face, or did they kind of take a guesswork of what that?
I think they took a guesswork. Okay. I don't think that the article specifically says whether or not they guessed or they mirrored it.
Yeah.
But correct me if I'm wrong. And then afterwards they stuck it on. I think the picture on the site is literally just the piece that's taken off directly from the 3D printer. So it's white and it actually stands out very much. But I'm sure they're going to be post-processing it to make it more like the original.
Right.
With the wear and tear and everything.
Contemporary art sometimes has that contrast of old and new. So perhaps it's one of those as well.
Yeah.
Huh.
So then also, which next point is about reconstructing fossils. There's a huge project that is actually reprinting mammoth fossil, apparently as the biggest in the world.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think they're also using SLS technology.
Powder.
Yes.
Powder-based? Okay. Actually, plastic, SLS, powder-based plastic.
Yes.
Okay.
And just from that, I think the mammoth tooth was like this big. Yeah.
That's a pretty big SLS machine. I mean, SLS we don't typically see in that size. Yeah. You can imagine.
Or I could be wrong.
Something that can print this big in SLS is essentially the space that we're kind of sitting in.
Yeah.
I mean, not quite that big, but the bigger it gets, the bigger the machine gets. Yeah. Just like a printer that would print a house needs to be bigger than the house.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, perhaps it's one of those where it's using a novel material that then gets mixed and printed. Clay, ceramics, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But that's actually kind of interesting. I guess the reason, again, probably is to preserve, right?
It's either preserve the original mammoth fossil, or there are pieces that are missing, and
the fill in the blank.
Yeah, fill in the blank. The digital reconstruction.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting. I never thought of that. Typically you go and excavate, you find a fossil,
and usually you don't find everything, right? And
I don't actually know. Do you or do you not?
I don't think you usually find everything.
If any of you are archaeologists out there that are watching this, would love to find out if you dig up something, a T-Rex or a mammoth, do you get everything? Because if you don't, then this technology makes a lot of sense to fill in the blanks. Yeah. Because like I've been to those dinosaur shows where it looks mostly whole, but I don't know what I'm looking at half the time.
Yeah.
But like a rib. What if like one is missing?
Yeah.
Or if it's half broken, then they can kind of fill in the.
Yeah, I mean, then now you won't. I guess they're still very scarce. But I'm saying then even if you're missing a chunk, you can still display this and just fill in the blank with a 3D printer.
Okay, that's kind of fascinating. That's a whole new level of using the technology for like, what is it? Is it preservation? No, it's it's filling in that blank.
Yes.
So a lot of the times we think about 3D printing, it's about preserving data, repeating data, have one part being able to make 10,000 parts, right? This is having no part.
Yes.
And filling in said part. I think you talked about the last topic, which was, the sculpture with the half missing face. It's kind of like that. We don't find that in our...
It's actually very fascinating, which just reminded me, actually, it just came into my head. I believe, Jurassic Park, everyone knows that movie.
Yeah.
Inside that movie, they actually 3D printed a piece of a raptor, like something in the raptor's head. Okay. Which then, if he blew in it, it sounded like the raptor noises. That part.
I kind of remember the vocal cord or whatever it was.
That thing. Like without 3D printers, you would never have thought how would they actually use the trachea or whatever they call it to do that.
I mean, you wouldn't want to hand carve it. You don't even have the data.
Yeah.
Well, I guess they must have had the data.
They must. I think they guessed, because the only thing that you can think about is if I get a pile of fossils. Yeah. You don't know which part is which.
Well, here's an interesting thing. So it's a bit of a detour from our topic right now, about what you just said, which is you can actually take CT scans, images of CT scans, and you can actually print that out.
Okay.
So you can put you and you can put yourself through a CT scanner, you can extrapolate the data, and you can print that data out. So you can go and get your brain scanned, and you can print your brain.
But that's only if I'm like a live specimen, right?
Yeah, I think.
But for dinosaurs, they're dead.
I would imagine you can kind of take a similar approach. I mean, a good quality 3D scanner can probably get the job done as well. It would be a lot of work to get all the intricacies of a like a trachea, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But a 3D, I believe a CT scan. I mean, you wouldn't use a CT scan for that reason. You can still get the layers. In machine. Yeah.
Wow.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe.
That just popped into my head, like right there.
Oh, that's actually kind of fascinating. Yeah. Move on.
The next topic with using 3D printers and like artifacts or paintings, what they're doing is actually they're turning a 2D painting into 3D painting. So imagine the Mona Lisa
having
it's 3D.
Third dimension.
Yeah, third dimension to it instead of 2D. I guess it'll lose the it's always looking at you effect.
Yeah. But how would they get the 3D data? Do they extrapolate? Do they guesswork?
I believe it's like making a lithophane.
Okay, so they're adding layers to the actual. Yeah. So.
Which is interesting approach. But this is completely, I guess it's not even restoration or
this is completely novel.
Yeah.
Right? This is just changing the way that an artifact, a painting, something that is historical gets interpreted in modern times.
Yeah.
I can feel some people getting offended by this. Like imagine a Mona Lisa 3D
printed version.
Lithopaint, 3D textured, I'm going to call it that.
Yeah. It'll be weird.
Yeah, it would. It may put some people off, but for sure, I think I think everyone is trying new ways to do things, and if no one ever tries, we'll never know.
Yeah.
So I would like to see one. Like I don't know what would Starry Night look like 3D.
I guess I don't know. It would probably be a couple bumps.
On a photo, you won't be able to tell much. But if it's actually physically in front of you, I wonder if the experience would be totally different.
I don't know. Maybe we'll see that.
Maybe I'll seek one out or something. Maybe we'll do an experiment with like a lithopaint thing where
we replicate something like that. Maybe. Yeah. I'm not sure how it will work.
Yeah, that maybe we'll do a bit of investigative digging into just for my own curiosity and to see what that would look like. Because we know when you print a lithopane and you just look at a lithopane, it looks like nothing.
Yeah. Unless you mess up and inverted it.
Then it just looks like the actual photo.
Yeah.
Right? But just having 3D data over an image almost looks like nothing. Mm-hmm. And so we'll find out.
It could become a trend in the future.
Perhaps. Yeah. We did see the 3D photos on Facebook and places like that become a trend. So 3D is becoming a thing of the future in terms of getting a better experience. And this theme here is a better experience.
Yeah.
As much as it is preservation of articles and artifacts, it
enhances someone's experience.
And so if that experience changes, enhanced or other way around, it's still a new experience. So it's still a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we just have 2 more points that we're actually going to take a look at for museum artifacts. For the last one of the last ones, we're looking at using 3D scanners and 3D printers to replicate 18th century indigenous tools. So they're actually scanning the original object and then afterwards 3D printing it. And then afterwards, you would think it's just for like display. But no, they're actually using these tools as like a way to go back and learn their heritage or their culture.
How things were done in the days.
Yeah.
So they're actually trying out the tools.
Yeah, so they're using this tool and they're going back to like the tribe elders.
Yeah.
And then asking them to teach them
how these were used.
Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. It's kind of like bringing back the lost art.
Yeah. It was like
perfect.
I think it was like animal hide tanning artifacts tools. They printed it out. Well, first of all, it preserves the knowledge. It has a digital file that's going to be on the internet forever. Second of all, for them, they get to experience their culture and how their ancestors did it.
Right.
So that's pretty nice.
Preservation of skill set now is a totally different set of things. I think it's a really great idea because things are often lost in history. As we get more modern and more efficient with building things, the olden days of doing things are lost. And sometimes it's good to know and preserve and pass that down. I think it's absolutely necessary. It's a great
even
idea.
Sometimes modern technology may not produce the same result as olden days methods. And if that is lost, then I guess you just never get those ever again.
And this is a great way to bring that back. As long as somebody who knows how to use the tool still exists.
Yes.
So better now than ever.
Yeah. So they actually, other than the animal hide tanning artifacts, they also use 3D printing to print like how they usually made fishing spears back then, tools, other tools, but mostly animal hide tanning tools. Fishing spears was just on the side. I think mostly she wanted to learn how to use the tool to tan animal hide.
And I'm assuming that kind of technology was lost and brought back through this.
Yes, because she had to go back to one of her elders to actually ask them to teach them how to use it. Yeah. She actually wanted to get in touch with her culture or heritage as well.
Right.
So that's how she...
Returning to the roots kind of system. Yeah. This is all really fascinating because I think we in modern world thinks about pushing things forward as fast as possible. Efficiency, 3D printing. We work in advanced manufacturing for that reason. But using this tool to go backwards and relearn some of the skill sets, this is actually the first time I've heard about that. So that's actually kind of fast. This whole entire area of preservation and experience is where I think the technology hasn't been typically looked at. And I'm fascinated by the fact that this is the place that it's doing that the most.
Yeah. You would. Well, I wouldn't have thought about using it this way, but I think if, let's say there is a course that teaches you how to use tools or artifacts from
olden days,
I think it'll be fascinating to actually learn how they did things. and maybe make us feel we're maybe a lot more lucky than like I'm sure there's some things that are a lot more convenient now.
I'm pretty sure.
Technology.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a way to learn about the history, history courses, whatever. Yeah. But it's also kind of just an interesting way to tap into your roots if you are wherever you're from. Yeah. If you want to, learn the olden day tools, there isn't any other way to do that.
Yeah. So I think this is actually pretty fascinating that they're doing this.
Sign me up. That's all I would say. I mean, there are some things that I think we can go back and see how things were done and learn from those moments to make even today an even better place. So whoever thought of that idea,
props to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for the last point it's back to the original, which is preservation. Essentially, Smithsonians are working with indigenous tribes to actually bring in all the hats, the garments, the helmets that like chief used to wear, and stuff like that. That maybe it's kind of lost its place in modern times. They're actually asking them to bring it in, and then they take a digital copy of it, and then that would remain in the database forever. And even if the real thing gets destroyed or anything like that, it's lost, they can actually replicate it.
I can see that translating into the future digital space. Talking about VR for a second. That has a lot of connotation and connectivity there. And so absolutely, things in the physical world break all the time. To have a catalog of the physical thing, I think it will change the way that we do things in the future. Whether it be through 3D manufacturing technologies or 3D visual technologies, VR, both has a place, and 3D is right in the middle of all that.
I mean, the whole point of this whole series is to show how much 3D printing is impacting our world, how much, how big it will be, right? How our lives will change.
Yeah, this one also goes into just the world of 3D in general too, because of 3D scanning, 3D cataloging, 3D digital files, and just it's what the 3D printing industry is about. It's not actually just about the hardware. It's also about all the revolving technologies that are there, which is everything that I just mentioned, and more. So that's actually kind of cool. I think Second Life, call it that. VR is going to be around. It's not here now in full adoption, but it's going to be. Just almost like 3D printing is here now. It's not in full adoption, but I think it will be. So yeah.
Well, especially after everything that has happened this year in 2020, I'm pretty sure 3D printing is going to play a larger part in society.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, that's everything we have today. So we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Before that, remember to subscribe with the button down there, and also click the bell button to always get a notification every time we release a new episode. And you can also listen to this on Spotify and Anchor as a podcast. And that's everything.
Yeah. I guess we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
Cheers.
See ya.
Bye.